My name is Matt Bogosian, and you are in the House Manufacturing Caucus briefing on growing American manufacturing communities. I'm delighted to be the executive director of a new national nonprofit organization called the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative. The AMC Collaborative, we call AMCC for short, is a group of communities around the country that we'll talk about in more detail. I want to start off by saying thanks to the House Manufacturing Caucus, Representatives Tom Reed and Tim Ryan, the co-chairs, and their staff, Casey Morris and Melissa Maynard. And Casey, yeah, thank you very much. Casey, you have a few announcements you want to share? Yeah.
Thank you all for coming today. We are very happy to have our speakers today, and we are especially happy because this was an outgrowth of some legislation that the caucus worked. Can't hear me? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. This Made in America Manufacturing Communities Bill was introduced in the last Congress, ended up in the Defense Appropriations, and that's what's brought our speakers here today. And we will be reintroducing that bill today, along with Congressman Ciceline's office. So I wanted to let you all know about that, and hopefully you will be sponsors of it. I also wanted to mention two other bills that are currently relevant for the Manufacturing Caucus. The American Manufacturing Leadership Act was introduced last week, right? And that will extend the Manufacturing USA program, so existing institutes can have another term, and also provide authorization for a couple new institutes. So we're happy about that, and that will be coming along soon, so I hope you pay attention to that. And then lastly, the Chief Manufacturing Officers Act will be introduced most likely next week with both here and in the Senate. So look for that. Melissa Maynard is the point person on that, so if you're interested in sponsoring that, speak to her. And then just last, I wanted to mention that we will have our next briefing on June 6th, and it's on metamorphic manufacturing. So that should be an exciting new technology. I didn't know what it was, but it has to do with very hot metals and bending and robotics and making unique and interesting devices. So with that, turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate that. I want to say also thanks to key partners that are part of the AMC Collaborative, the Northeast Midwest Institute and Michael Goff, the Century Foundation, Andy Stettner, Amanda Novella, and Marielle Izzoni, and our AMCC intern, David Van Sicklin, and Ross Brennan from Representative Cicilline's office. So thank you all. So what to expect in this briefing? So we are going to have one or two House members address the group. We're not sure exactly when they're going to be here, but when they do get here, we'll have them come up and say a few words. We appreciate their support for this, briefing about this model program that has developed over the last 5 years. We'll hear about some important research about how this model has evolved. And then most importantly, we're going to hear from a panel of communities around the country that have been executing this model manufacturing program. So that's what to expect in the next 90 minutes. We'll have some time, hopefully at the end, for some Q&A. So we're very excited that you're all here to listen to this. So a little bit about these communities. Who are they? The communities of AMCC are the boots on the ground from across America working to accelerate progress with local leaders who recognize the evidence. And that's that, if America is going to thrive in the 21st century, we have to rebuild our manufacturing communities to be more sustainable. An important part of this includes shoring up our defense industrial base. It won't be easy, it's complex work, but you'll hear today from community leaders around the country that with more support and teamwork, we can expect great results. This model manufacturing community program started out as a designation program called IMCP, Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership. It was about 5 years ago, and it was 13 federal agencies got together and created a bottom-up effort to help communities self-organize to first assess and then strengthen their regional manufacturing ecosystems. It was led by the Commerce Department's Economic Development and Administration with other key agencies like the Department of Defense and its Office of Economic Adjustment. Even though communities receive no automatic funding by earning this federal designation, their work then and now, 5 years later, continues to produce results, enhancing other federal investments in manufacturing and proving the case that this ecosystem approach to more sustainable economic development is our best path forward. So that gets us to why we are here. So we're sharing these lessons from these 5 years, from these communities all around the country that have been exercising this model, so Congress can help scale this work to American manufacturing communities to both strengthen the defense industrial base and create a more sustainable American economy, producing more jobs with better trained and higher paid workers, all producing world-class products that address critical needs. That means this briefing informs two things that Congress is addressing right now: a law that's on the books and a law that ought to be, Casey was talking about. So first, let me speak to the law that's on the books. As a Navy veteran myself, I was delighted to see last year's National Defense Authorization Act. Congress authorized a new manufacturing community federal designation program called the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program. And this month, appropriators here in Congress are considering how much to fund this new program and what entity within DoD ought to execute it. If you've seen the 2018 DoD report called Assessing and Strengthening the Defense and Manufacturing Communities, Defense Industrial Base Report, it's alarming. We have a lot of work to do, but the good news is with this 5-year model program, we don't have to start from scratch. Funding this Defense Manufacturing Community Program can accelerate the work within existing manufacturing communities, and it will help newly designated defense communities around the nation step up and take smarter, cost-efficient practices, shoring up our industrial base ecosystem. So funding the new program will give defense manufacturing communities the opportunity to build in the lessons and ingenuity of this ecosystem approach, perfect that approach, and then scale this bottom-up model to address critical needs. It's complex ecosystem approach, and there's many challenges to perfecting it, but now we have a model that Congress can fund to shore up the foundation of our national security, which gets us at the law that ought to be on the books. And this is good timing because there's no better way to describe the law that ought to be on the books, the Manufacturing Communities Act, than to introduce one of its co-authors, the Honorable Member of Congress from the 1st Congressional District of Rhode Island, Congressman David Cicilline.
Perfect. Wow. Yeah, that was like ideal.
I should go buy a lottery ticket. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being part of this really important effort to expand and support our manufacturing communities. As we continue to rebuild our nation's economy from the Great Recession, it's really important that we focus, in my view, on growing manufacturing jobs and ensuring that American manufacturers can compete and succeed in the global marketplace. I want to thank my colleague from Utah, Congressman Chris Stewart, for being here today and for his ongoing work to support our manufacturing communities. I also want to recognize Matt Bogosian of the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, Andy Stetner of the Century Foundation, and the panelists who are here for their really committed and relentless efforts in this regard. I come from the state of Rhode Island, which I like to remind people was the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution. Manufacturing was really a centerpiece of the development of our state, of the building of the middle class of our state. It made Rhode Island a thriving center of commerce on the East Coast in the 20th century. And although, like much of the Rust Belt, we've seen factories and mills close in recent years, it remains a very critical sector and one that I'm really committed to fighting for. Manufacturers still employ tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders and export nearly $2 billion a year in products. And so I know that with good federal policy, we can do even more and even grow more significantly our manufacturing base in Rhode Island. As you all know, the fiscal year 19 National Defense Authorization Bill included a provision, Section 846, which established a defense manufacturing community support program, authorizing the Department of Defense to work with the Department of Commerce to designate and support community consortiums to make long-term investments in critical skills, infrastructure, research and development, and small business support in order to strengthen the national security innovation base and really to help develop this defense ecosystem to the support of manufacturing. This will be a critical part of the Department of Defense's effort to address industrial deficiencies that really undermine our military's ability to respond quickly to a national security threat or any of our strategic adversaries. The program aims to address a missing component of DoD's investments in manufacturing, and that is the support for robust regional manufacturing capabilities able to take new technologies to market, to meet the needs of our military, and to create good-paying jobs in our communities. It's my hope that when we go through the appropriations process, the Appropriations Committee will recognize the importance of this program and allocate adequate funding to ensure that DoD can facilitate the implementation of this new initiative and to allow for non-designated communities to compete for designation as well, enabling existing federal designated manufacturing communities to spur new efforts targeted to the needs of regional manufacturers in the defense supply chain. So it's an opportunity to really operationalize this program. As this particular program gets up and running, I think it's also really important to work to expand its success to other sectors of our manufacturing economy, this related specifically to defense. And that's why today I'm really pleased to announce that Congressman Tom Reed of New York and I will be introducing the bipartisan Make in America Manufacturing Communities Act. This legislation will support opportunities to strengthen communities' ability to compete for federal funding in order to grow manufacturing jobs, to strengthen local economies, and bring together leaders in business, government, the nonprofit sector, and higher education to develop new strategies and best practices, and really increasing the coordination between higher education institutions, the private sector, and government entities will help to align the needs of manufacturers and help to grow the 21st century workforce in a way that will support the growth of manufacturing. This program designates regionally driven consortiums as manufacturing communities after a rigorous application process administered by the Economic Development Administration. Manufacturing communities would then have their designation considered as an additional factor when applying for the nearly $1.3 billion in existing federal economic development assistance funds through a number of participating agencies. So it would incentivize the creation of these regional hubs and then give them a priority in the designation, because of the designation, in accessing federal funds. This will allow existing communities an opportunity to continue to implement their manufacturing strategies and give aspiring communities like my state the opportunity to receive a designation. So I want to thank you all for being here today. I hope that you will, in the different ways that you can, support this legislation. It's really a way to make sure that we are investing in the manufacturing ecosystems, doing it in a kind of responsible way, and building partnerships between the private sector, higher education, foundations, the business community, and government, working together to align resources and priorities to really help strengthen manufacturing communities all across our country. So thank you very much.
Again, thank you, Congressman Cicciolini. Appreciate you being here. Your support for all of these efforts. And I understand that Representative Stewart is coming, or we're not sure exactly, but he's in support and is trying to get here. That's what I understand. So we talked about what are the things that are going to happen here. We talked about the program. We have the congressional support. Now, what's the research? What's happened during these 5 years? And for that, I want to introduce Andy Stettner from the Century Foundation. That's going to give us a quick landscape view of how this ecosystem approach works and how we can build it better. Andy?
Good afternoon, everyone. First, thanks to Representative Cicciolini and Stewart for taking their time out of their busy schedule to be here. And the representative did mention that he led an effort that got 22 members of Congress from 8 states to support the appropriation for this new program. Thanks to Matt Bogosian and Michael Goff, fellow co-founders, of the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative and my Century Foundation colleagues that are here today. It's really most remarkable, the community leaders who have traveled from all over the country and who are very excited to be here today in Washington, who call Matt and Mike and I our best friends forever. And that's probably the best compliment I've gotten in my many years of advocacy. Let me start, and if we can go to the next slide. First is just why manufacturing matters. And I think the bottom line is it matters as a source of good paying jobs and community economic growth. You know, today workers in manufacturing still earn 13% more than they do in other sectors. And while that's not as much as they used to earn as before, it's still very important, especially to workers without a college degree who make $150 more per week in manufacturing than they do in other jobs. But more importantly, manufacturing drives innovation in our economy. Actually, 67% of all research and development spending in the United States comes from manufacturing firms. And the decline in manufacturing has meant that innovation has followed production overseas. You know, one story is U.S. computer companies started with the idea they could outsource the production of laptops to East Asia. But that production gave East Asia the edge in display technology, which led to flat panel displays, advanced batteries, which they are now both designing and producing and profiting from. And so without our manufacturing base, we lose our economic development base. Now, something has changed. 30 years ago, I'm old enough to remember when we negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, we had this idea that it would be around the creative destruction of jobs in manufacturing and would create new jobs in the service economy. Now we're renegotiating NAFTA with the idea of creating a North American manufacturing powerhouse. There's a new recognition of the importance of manufacturing. So, you know, we have some ground to make up. Manufacturing declined from 18% of our economy in 1988 to 11% in 2018. But that's not a fait accompli. Germany and Japan, other advanced economies, still have 21% of their GDP in manufacturing. But despite that kind of strength and that loss of GDP, manufacturing kind of, as you see in this graph, kind of held steady through the 90s in terms of jobs, but then had a very steep decline, 5.7 million jobs being lost from 2000 to 2010. But where manufacturing is kind of back on the upswing. We had several major manufacturers like Cat and Tractor who had record third quarter earnings. And this recovery, which really started in the auto sector and kind of people buying American cars again, has moved more broadly to a very broad-based manufacturing recovery, with manufacturing actually adding more jobs in 2018 than any year in the past 30 years. A total of 1.5 million jobs since 2010. It's not all roses by any means. Manufacturing job growth slowed in the first quarter, and manufacturing sentiment is dropping a little bit. And the critical thing for today's briefing, go to the next slide, is that this decline, as Matt mentioned, has taken its toll on the defense industrial base. There's a comprehensive review that followed the Trump administration executive order. And one thing it found that throughout the defense industrial chain, there's a declining number of suppliers that are able to supply. What does that mean? Well, there are numerous components that are in the very complex machinery that the military requires that either have fragile suppliers, only single or sole suppliers that supply those components, and that means we can't ramp up if there needs to be more production, or whole systems, very complex systems development can be stalled if that one supplier has a problem. One example was given is that the Air Force needs chaff, which are small aluminum and zinc coated fibers that come out of the back of airplanes to distract missiles. But the unique requirements for this type of metal manufacturing drove out all the other suppliers, and there's only a single company that sources this critical component. And beyond those kind of direct military components, there is major concern expressed in the report about all of this, what they call sub-tiers of the defense supply chain. These are all the different components that are needed both in the commercial market and the defense market. So one example is machine tools. That's a kind of production that produces both metal components and composite components. We've had the extreme decline in our ability to create machine tools. We're now 7th in the world in machine tool production, behind not just China, but also Japan, Germany, Italy, and South Korea. And speaking of that, there's a critical concern around foreign dependency for very critical components. Everything from specialty chemicals to rare earth materials and to electronic equipment in an environment where global competition, as we've seen from China and Russia, is often about not direct warfare, but around cyber warfare and the control and economic competition. These kind of risks are risks that are top of mind. And there was an unmanned aerial flight system that had to be discontinued after security risks from a Chinese supplier were identified. So these are major concerns, and one kind of across all these issues is you can't have a manufacturing base if you don't have talent. And there's concern both about engineering and mathematical talent, STEM talent, and the lack of skilled trades workers, machinists and production workers that significantly impact our ability to produce in manufacturing. So on to this program. Why do we need this new Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program? I'm sure many of you who are here on the Hill, and I've heard this, have different, members are sponsoring different bills around manufacturing. There are many different programs, and I've certainly heard people say, it's just confusing to figure out how all these programs fit together. So let me take my, stab here. Well, first you have the DoD that's investing in, fundamental manufacturing technologies for specific weapon systems, and also in some of the core technologies like 3D printing, additive manufacturing, that serve both the defense and commercial market. So you have those two kind of drivers. And then you have Phil Singerman here from the Federal Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is a national network of centers that help individual small businesses kind of optimize their production and meet the cybersecurity needs of defense manufacturing. But these alone won't make the military supply chain work. Because what does this all have to run through? It has to run through manufacturing businesses that exist in regional economies. Regional economies are where the clusters of suppliers that the industrial base needs, whether it's aerospace or shipbuilding, primary and fabricating metals or composite electronics, those live not, they're spread across the country, but they're specifically in clusters of those suppliers in regional economies. And that's where the base of talent, both engineering and frontline talent, is today to rebuild that capacity. It's the regional economies that can take these new technologies to market, can meet the needs of the military, and provide good jobs across America. And how do we build those regional economies? For too long, economic development has been about one state giving individual company a tax break to bring a factory from another state. Well, we can see that doesn't meet any national needs if we're just moving factories around. Instead, we need strategic economic development, where regional leaders from different local governments, companies, labor and community, and academia analyze that region's strengths and figure out what sources the most competitive sectors need to grow and thrive. So actually, and throughout our economy, not just manufacturing, in this global marketplace, it's actually research has found it's more important than ever where you have geographic clusters, where innovation is shared through companies, where you have entrepreneurship and support in a very flat world, the way you to be competitive, you need to be close together and building specialization. And that's how the economy is driving. Now, federal policies cannot create clusters. You can't say, we really want to bring, and I've seen this, we want to bring a lot of high-tech industry to Saginaw, Michigan. It's not easy to do that. But what we can do is you can say where the free market has tested and developed competitive clusters, and particularly in manufacturing, we can help communities strengthen those clusters. This is critical to manufacturing. It's so important that two Harvard Business School professors, Gary Pisano and Willie Shee, published a best-selling book where they found that the decline of the common resources between manufacturers is a hidden consequence and cause of the decline in manufacturing we saw. So basically, we won't bring manufacturing back until we fix this. And the new Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program kind of puts this theory into action. So this is, I think we have one more slide maybe? No, that's it, okay, good. So it's not a new idea, as Matt said. It's a result of an innovative and very successful pilot program. And, we at Century Foundation, we're studying what it would take to revitalize manufacturing communities and really came to champion this program because it was really kind of pinpointing this idea that we need a race to the top for the future of manufacturing from communities. So that's what this program did. It set up a competition that challenged communities to come up with a compelling plan for how they're going to rebuild their cluster. And that strategic plan and that process kind of mobilized people in a different way, and we're able to, without, as Matt said initially, without a specific appropriation, allows communities to come together across jurisdictional lines in ways they never have. You'll hear about that. New innovative programs, both around technology, around workforce, around industrial retention, new programs that weren't existed before. And so those components of the IMCP, this idea of a competition, of designated technical assistance to help communities navigate all the myriad of different programs that are out there to meet the needs of their strategic plan. And I think going forward, to go from this pilot we had with IMCP to more of a permanent resource in communities, a source of resources for the backbone organizations you're going to meet today to start really building that race to the top. So what's next for this program? I think this program uniquely is kind of ready for action. It's authorized under law. The communities there's been 24 communities that have already gone through this rigorous planning process. The Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment was one of 13 federal agencies involved in the initial program. So many of these programs have a lot of experience working on needs of the defense industrial base. What we need now to get going, and we've heard this from our colleagues at the Department of Defense, we need an appropriation. This is a program that's authorized, but needs an appropriation to get going. The testimonies indicated that the Office of Economic Adjustment is a likely place to house it. They don't really have the resources to implement this program, and in addition to giving the resources to the communities. So that's where we are. As I mentioned, we had a number of members of Congress that supported the appropriation, and we're looking forward to the DoD markup. I think it's supposed to be scheduled for next week, May 15th. So I hope it's something that people here in this room can help us out with. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Andy. That was excellent, and appreciate getting that wide overview. And so it begs the question, what does this look like in the real world? And so that's why we have some of these communities that have been working on these IMCP partnerships for 5 years. They're going to be coming up to join Michael Goff, of the president of the Northeast Midwest Institute, who's going to moderate a panel and ask him some questions. What's happening in your community? How did you do this? And how testify about the importance of this model. So let me pass the mic over to Michael Goff, president of Northeast Midwest Institute. Michael.
Well, thank you. Our panelists are going to join us up here. And just to begin, I just want to say the Northeast Midwest Institute is just so happy to be involved in this American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative. It has not only a great track record and a great national network, but it's got huge potential that we know we can capture in the next couple of years. The panel we're moving on to is to share with you the strength, the greatest strength this has, which the Manufacturing Communities Collaborative has 24 communities all over the nation that are engaged already and making a real impact in their community by collaborating with one another, even without funding, and much more can be done when there is funding, which is what we're trying to build toward. We want to share their experiences and their expertise with you as just indicative of what's happening in the other 20. There's 24 altogether, we have 4 here. So to kick off, we're going to have Jeff Edwards, who's Executive Director of the Utah Advanced Materials Manufacturing Initiative, to share the profile of his organization and what it's accomplishing, and also some of his expertise. So Jeff.
Great, thank you, Michael. It's a lot of fun to be here. We've thought about this for a long time, and it's great to see it come together. So, our little organization is centered around advanced materials. When we looked across every state has got a collection of ecosystems, and you can make just about any state have that. But we really rose to the top of that was this idea of centering around advanced materials. But when we look back on it, the origins of it are really not new. In fact, I'm reminded of a very important historical event just in recent weeks have become very important. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln set in motion the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. The project was completed on May 10th, 1869. And I'll have to say, with the driving of the Golden Spike in a site just not far from Salt Lake City in Ogden, Utah. Tomorrow is May 10th, and it marks the 150th anniversary of the joining of the rails and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And it'll be a huge celebration in Utah. In fact, I have to leave a little bit early from this event to get back in time to be there for that event tomorrow. But the railroad transformed our country, and it joined east to west as Lincoln had hoped. And it's not lost on any Utahn that I know of that this took place in our state, and that we are understandably very proud of our legacy and what we have to live up to. To demonstrate that technological know-how in this day and age, one of our great Utah companies is actually making an exact replica of the Golden Spike using 3D printing and making a titanium 3D spike that will be on display tomorrow at the Golden Spike event. We thought that was pretty cool. We've been at the center of the many technological advancements, and in particular development of advanced materials to support the Department of Defense. This program started with the DoD supply chain back in the 1950s with the development of carbon fiber, fiberglass, and other materials for the intercontinental ballistic missile programs. Today, there are over 100 companies and well over 12,000 workers that are working in advanced materials. As you heard Matt say earlier, the IMCP program came along at just the right time and allowed the creation of our organization that we affectionately call UAMI, which is about trying to find ways to advance and move this cause of advanced materials forward. And there's just many ways that we're involved in the Department of Defense. And here's a few thoughts on what that looks like. Everybody is worried about workforce. On Monday night, I had a chance to attend the graduation ceremony for a program that we call Aerospace Pathways. And this is a high school senior apprenticeship program that's intended to give high school kids a chance to work hands-on in one of the 6 big aerospace companies in the state and give them a chance to prove themselves in that program. We had 60 graduate. I got to tell you, we did it in the state capitol. The governor handed out the diplomas. Moms and dads were there taking pictures of Billy and Sally graduating from the program, and every one of those kids was offered a job at Boeing or Northrop or Hexcel or one of the big companies, and they were so excited. There was a kid with a Boeing shirt on, and you know darn well they'd be playing video games, but here they are working in an aerospace company and learning the skills to deal with advanced materials. We got a great collaboration with everybody put together to make that happen in our state, kind of a unique program. Advanced materials like carbon fiber are great and they're amazing, but they're too expensive and they can't find their way into lots of different programs. So we've initiated a program in our state to try to find a way to convert coal into carbon fiber. It's a non-combustion process. It creates advanced materials at low cost, but it also creates jobs in coal-impacted communities and creates better materials for fuel-efficient military vehicles and low-cost systems like UAVs. And you can see some of the other defense programs that we work with in our state. We're connected to many, many programs inside the state. We're also looking for ways to bring new technologies, and our job is to try to get the universities to work better with industry. And to do that, we're trying to bring new materials and new systems like graphene, new ceramics, and new processing, even for doing 3D carbon fiber printing, which is the latest thing. There's a lot of rural communities in our state and across the country that feel like they got left out of the recovery. And we're doing an effort in our state to try to get the suppliers in those small communities better connected with all the big aerospace guys, and we have a concerted effort around that that's now being funded by the SBA. And lastly, our organization was able to take $2 million in state money and leverage that into $11 million of federal money that we've gotten directly to help out companies and industries in our state. But to me, the best thing about this is this collaboration that you're seeing right here together. Every Monday morning, we have a half-an-hour call where everybody that's involved in this gets together and we get a chance to hear what's going on. Sarah's our lodge leader for our group here that keeps us all going. But we get a chance to collaborate and talk about issues that are happening in our state. So we've got common themes, and it's great to have that. So I'm a huge fan of this, Matt. We appreciate your support in making this happen, and very happy to be here. So Michael, I'll end with that. So thanks.
second great community we have with us is Pittsburgh. So I want to turn the mic over to Petra Mitchell, the president and CEO of Catalyst Connection, who leads the greater Pittsburgh region manufacturing community.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I also am very pleased to be here and thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm the president and CEO of Caucus Connection, and we are the MEP of Southwestern Pennsylvania, so I'm very proud of our MEP work, but more importantly, I'm proud of the greater Pittsburgh region. I'm a proud Pittsburgher for sure. And if you look back at our 100-year or so history in the greater Pittsburgh region, it's really a story of growth, decline, and then regrowth, revitalization. Our industrial titans, really helped to build this country. They leveraged our natural resources. We have 3 rivers in Pittsburgh that moved a lot of raw materials that we also have in our backyard. They built steel, they made glass, other significant advanced materials that essentially secured and built our country. And then the 1970s happened, and the steel industry collapsed, and there was no bailout. And we had the biggest decline of any community in the country. And people left, lots of people left. And it is the reason we now have Steeler Nation all over this country and practically all over the world. It's the tie that binds. It binds those Pittsburghers and their second and third generations back to their hometown that they had to leave because we had this significant decline. Fortunately, there's opportunities for them to come back because our region has been growing. We've revitalized, we've leveraged our resources, our world-class research institutions, our terrific workforce, our highly skilled workers, and continue to leverage our natural resources. And now we're focused on growing our advanced manufacturing sector. At the core of that growth is still advanced manufacturing, even though we have other industries as well. Advanced manufacturing is one of our key sectors, and we've been able to secure a number of world-class investments, including 2 Manufacturing USA institutes that are part of our community, America Makes and the ARM Institute. We've secured significant amount of funding from the U.S. Army to become their supplier or their support system for additive manufacturing, technology insertion, and supply chains, a program called AM Now. And we think we can leverage those 2 initiatives to, essentially become the world's greatest center for additive manufacturing. That's our challenge that we've given to ourselves. At the same time, we need to continue to focus on our workforce. And we have the community assets, we have our philanthropic institutions, organizations, other state private funding. We have a number of campaigns to engage our students, parents, teachers, like many of you have as well. And it's making a difference. We're starting to connect that demand, for workers with the job seekers in our community. One of our key initiatives we call our Team Consortium, that's bringing together all our educational institutions and our educational assets, including our 4-year universities, our community colleges, and other high school programs. So we have a lot to be proud of. Those initiatives we have estimated have brought in at least $36 million of new funding just in the last 3 years. But we know we have a lot more to do. We still have a significant skilled worker shortage. We have manufacturers that need to continue to invest in technology, and we need to bring all those things together. So we're very much looking forward to this Defense Manufacturing Communities Initiative. We see this as a significant opportunity to continue to secure and build our country like we have in the past. We can do it again.
Thank you, Patrick. So we also have with us Carmen Molina Rios, who's the executive director of the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. So, Carmen, if you would give us your thoughts, we'd love to have that.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for this opportunity to share our story and to share with you the value that we've seen as being part of the IMCP communities and with our colleagues up here. Connecticut manufacturing is extremely important to Connecticut. We support the manufacturing sector supports approximately 164,000 employees. It employs 1 out of every 10 Connecticut workers. There's about 4,500 companies that are involved in advanced manufacturing, and The sector exports about $15.5 billion each year, representing 94% of the state's exports. So it's extremely important. We got our designation in 2015. We went through a competitive process. We applied the first round, did not get it. Went back and kind of looked at things a little differently and looked at our strategies, and then applied again in 2015 and were awarded the designation. We were awarded the designation because of the combination and the unique specialization in aerospace and shipbuilding defense around transportation equipment. Connecticut ranks 4th amongst the top 10 states in defense contract spending, about $14.4 billion. And it's home to top defense contractors, Electric Boat, Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky, and many of its supply base, companies and supply base are in Connecticut and in the region. Based on the work that we've done around utilizing the IMCP disciplines and foundation, we're able to create a strong public-private partnership that was governed by an advisory board of the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. The Manufacturing Innovation Fund is a $75 million fund that invests in manufacturing programming, specifically in the areas of talent development, supply chain competitiveness, and manufacturing innovation. And we have attracted federal dollars for those kind of efforts around workforce training, innovation, and cybersecurity. The leverage of federal funding was about $9.4 million, where we leveraged even that on other private industry investments totaling $115 million over the last 4 to 5 years. We've created about 9,000 jobs, trained about 14,000 incumbent workers. There's approximately 450 individuals that participated and are pre-apprentice or apprentices in Connecticut, and approximately about 1,200 companies have either participated or supported the effort or have been assisted by the fund. So as you can see, a lot of this is, we have a strong foundation to move forward and to continue those strategies and programming and investments to focus on the opportunities of advanced manufacturing, specifically around defense for Connecticut, and promoting the apprenticeships in our talent base. And in addition, we have, through the process, really engaged a strong industry participation and champions. So we feel excited to move forward, knowing that we have them with us to align our program design, provide oversight and governance in the work that we do. And through this, we've had some strong national and regional collaboration, as you can see today. And Connecticut is partnered with the New England states on a regional grant with our Office of Economic Adjustment. So it's kind of all, it's been building blocks that have allowed us to be where we are today. So we're very much excited and positioned to move forward. Specifically on the New England regional side, we will be looking at trusted supplier initiatives to enhance the ability to analyze and assess and monitor the vulnerabilities of our supply base. And on cybersecurity, to really look at providing platforms for awareness, assessments, and training of our companies around cybersecurity and efforts to counter threats to our critical weapon systems and technologies. So we're really excited to be part of this group, and we thank Matt and Sarah for their leadership. And I look forward to having any questions and opportunities to talking about our success further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. And then fourth, representing our 24 communities, we have Irene Scher, who's the Assistant Deputy Bureau Chief at the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development, and is going to talk about the Chicago Metro Metal Consortium. So, Irene, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Irene Scher with the Bureau of Economic Development in Cook County. Chicago is, just to orient everybody, Chicago is in Cook County. Half of the population of the city of Chicago is 2.5 million. Chicago is 2.5 million, Cook County is 2.5 million. Altogether, it's 5 million. And I want to talk briefly about our experience as part of the Manufacturing Community Program. And it changed the way we did business. Quite simply, one, it forced us to think about the region. When we started and we heard all about the program, we thought, okay, Cook County will apply. But as it turns out, you could only apply as a region. And really, metro areas and regions are the economic engines. And so it brought people from the city together with people from the county, and we all got together to think about what sector are we strong in. Secondly, and that collaboration on regional initiatives has continued to this day, not only related to manufacturing, but related to truck permitting, related to exports. So it's really changed the way we operate. Secondly, we also shifted to focusing on clusters. And now it seems just normal, but really Cook County had been doing a lot of its economic development with a greater focus on transactions, helping a business move from one place to the other. And the cluster focus helped us look at things through a cluster lens. And for example, I just want to give a story that's a little different than some of the pure business ones, but the region was considering applying for a Tiger grant, these massive transportation investments. So we solicited from the 7 counties in the city of Chicago. We got 13 proposals. We had our regional planning agency develop a model, and we evaluated these projects based on the number of fabricated metal and machinery companies that would be impacted by the project. We looked at how many brownfields would be open. So it wasn't the usual set of metrics that are used to evaluate a project, and we did this as a region. And so that's just an example of what it means to look at things through a cluster perspective. And our cluster, just to give you a sense of it, fabricated metal machinery is a lot of the nuts, bolts, screws, parts that make everything work. And we have 3,800 firms employing 110,000 people with about $18 billion in annual sales. And there are a lot of small businesses. 90% of the 3,800 have less than 50, and 50% have less than 10 employees. So these are companies that are really at the heart of the defense industry supply chain and provide important parts. And one thing we've learned as a result of this program, because we've done a defense supply chain mapping, we've started to meet some of these companies. And for example, there is a company in Harvey, Illinois, which is in the south suburbs, that says on their website that they are the only U.S. manufacturer of barbed wire that provides barbed wire to the U.S. Department of Defense. So, one, it amazes me. We know there are more people that can make barbed wire, but yet they're not part of the defense industry supply chain. And so that gets to one of the other challenges out there. Is there are a lot of good businesses everywhere, but getting into the defense industry supply chain is hard. And if you're in it, we have companies that have been providing, one small part to the Department of Defense for 40 years. They can't get DOD to look at them for something else. And one of the other challenges that this report on the sustainability of the defense network highlights is that we have so many companies that are at risk of closing, and the Defense Department needs, at least not for Northrop Grumman or Navistar, which are the 2 big OEMs in the Chicago region, but for smaller companies, they want low volume, highly customized parts. And a business really can't survive on a low volume, highly customized product. So one of the other things we've been doing with manufacturers is trying to help them diversify. And so we've helped a number of companies get into exporting. And we really see that as an opportunity for companies to enter new markets. So just within the Chicago area, we've worked with about 300 companies, helped them leverage $31 million in new sales from exports and create about 100 jobs. And again, these are all small companies. The last thing I want to touch on, and everybody has touched on it, but it can't go without saying, is the whole question of workforce. We won't have any screws, we won't have barbed wire if we don't have the workforce that can make it. And a lot of the smaller companies that we talk to, they'll say to me very proudly, oh, the average tenure of my employee is 38 years. Well, that's fabulous, 38 years, but that means these people are 55 and 60 and they're not going to be there forever, and there's not the next generation sitting there waiting. So we have done a lot of work to promote manufacturing as a career. We take school buses and take school superintendents and guidance counselors on tours of manufacturing facilities so that they can encourage students to think about careers in manufacturing. Because manufacturing is not, probably, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a manufacturing facility. How many have you? All right. So it may, I don't know where you went. There are all kinds. Some are kind of dark and have a lot of manual equipment, but some look like showrooms. And, you could have a party there. So there's quite a range. Now, that was something somebody said yesterday, is to have a cocktail party at a manufacturing plant to show teachers, parents, and coaches what the environment is like. And I think that's what we have to do, is really think differently about this. And the Defense Manufacturing Support Program creates that ecosystem that will foster the innovation that is needed to sustain and grow our defense supply chain. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you to the whole panel for these four great profiles. It really gives us a sense, and this is just the beginning of this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's 20 other communities, each with the same degree of vibrancy and excitement and good things happening. So we can't have this panel here and not ask questions. So I'm going to ask a few, but they're going to ask some of each other perhaps, and we want to hear from our guests here as well at the briefing. But just for starters, the hallmark of this whole collaborative is results, impacts. And so I just wanted to ask each of our panelists, just tell us an impact, a result, a concrete result in your own community that's already come from your work over these last couple of years. So maybe we could get back to go in the same order. Go back to Jeff.
As I listened to my colleagues up there, I forgot to mention that Utah is a very small place, geographically large, but we only have just barely 3 million people in our whole state. So when you hear the impacts in Chicago and big metros and Connecticut, these real powerhouse states, so for us the scale is a lot smaller, but it's very meaningful. I'd say probably one of the biggest impacts that we've seen has been in this high school apprenticeship program that I mentioned. Really dipping down. Right now in Utah, unemployment is below 3%. We're every able-bodied person that we can find, we're trying to get and put them out into the workforce to sustain about a 3% growth, which we have in our economy. You can't do that without reaching into different parts of the workforce. And so this high school program is trying to reach in and get young people to help them make a decision about going someplace, and I think we've had a good success with that. That would have never happened. We'd have never had the collaboration that we took to get the school districts and the technical colleges and the universities to all sit in the same room and talk about it, let alone to make it happen. And to have that happen were it not for this kind of glue that we inherited with the IMCP, this genetic base that we've got of collaboration that we've brought together. So that's Michael, that's one that I'm real proud of.
Great. Petra? Yeah.
Well, I'll continue the workforce theme. In Pennsylvania, not just greater Pittsburgh, but the entire state, we have a program called What's So Cool About Manufacturing. Yeah. And this is a middle school program where groups of middle schoolers team up with a local company in their community to produce a video, and the title of the video is What's So Cool About Manufacturing. And then we have a contest, and so people vote online. You can view all the videos. There's contests for different aspects, the most votes received, best marketing plan, best message, and so forth. And we convene these kids, the parents, the teachers, and the manufacturers and we have recognition events. And so it really brings the community together. In Pittsburgh, our event is held at Heinz Field, actually, where the Steelers play. They have a beautiful venue there. We bring about 800 people together. And it's just a tremendous, tremendous celebration of not only manufacturing, but of the work of these students. I have parents come up to me just with tears in their eyes thanking us for opening up their eyes and their children's eyes opportunities available for them. And I think just statewide, just quickly, we have 240 middle schools across the state of Pennsylvania that participate. Almost every county in Pennsylvania now has at least one middle school. And this is reaching now over 1 million views on their videos. We just wrapped up the contest for the school year. So it's really a great program that's making a big difference for a lot of these kids.
Carmen?
Well, I gave you a lot of statistics already. I threw a lot of statistics out at you earlier when I kind of gave a perspective on what we're doing, but I wanted to share an anecdotal kind of impact that demonstrates forward thinking when you invest in certain things. So through this work in the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, we have something that's called Manufacturing Voucher Program, where we fund a project for a company dollar for dollar, and then that company can purchase equipment, do innovative processes, a whole host of things to help further their plan. And we had one company, it's a second generation, now female owned, clearly said, had it not been for that program where they purchased one piece of equipment, new equipment, state-of-the-art equipment, the growth wouldn't have happened. What she said was, we invested in this piece of equipment, we looked out there, and it was like this beautiful shining spaceship, and said, wait a minute, we need to upgrade. So it allowed and incentivized her to think differently, and now they're investing in their company with new equipment, new technologies, and they're advancing their company. So that was just for me it was like, wow, a small amount of money had really made a difference for that particular company. And that's one program within the fund, and I touted off a lot of figures before, so, we have major impacts, but that one was one that was really specific to a company, second generation, female owned, and you don't see that, so it was pretty exciting and cool to see.
So I'll also keep with the workforce theme a little. One is one of my favorite manufacturers always says, if you want shade, you need to plant trees. So we do what we can to start as young as we can, and more schools in our region have robotics programs and challenges and Olympics. But there's I thought was a very powerful piece of data. The University of Illinois has something called the Great Cities Institute, and last year, between 2017 and 2018, there were 58,000 manufacturing jobs posted in the metro area of Chicago. So, and that was the fourth largest sector. First might have been healthcare, probably then there was business professionals, but four. So manufacturing is not dead. And overall, Chicago has unemployment now 4%, 3%. We have pockets, though, where it's 40%. And of those 58,000 jobs, only 1 out of 2 were filled. So there's this huge mismatch. And and this is probably true elsewhere, but there are people in this country that really need work, and there are many jobs going unfilled. And one of the things we are trying to do is to kind of broaden and open the universe of manufacturing to a much wider audience. We have an organization called the Young Manufacturers Association, and they are young adults that are maybe, out of school in their first manufacturing jobs, and they work as a peer support group for people that are in manufacturing that have never been there. And so, most manufacturing companies are owned by whites, most of the workforce is male, very few, limited diversity within the workforce. And so when an employee, this is their first job, runs into a problem, they can call their friend in the Young Manufacturing Association, and they can say, hey, don't worry about it. They've got a Facebook group, and they go out to community events, and they give out their card, and they say to people, you could go into manufacturing. I've got a job that pays $15 an hour. Try it. And what they say is that people are stunned, that because people don't think about themselves as having a future in manufacturing. So I just thought I'd share that story.
That's great. So, the other thing we want you to realize is this Manufacturing Communities Collaborative is about identifying and overcoming challenges. And we want to hear some of them. That's the future. So tell us about some of the challenges you're facing. So I think
We've lost
we
Jeff.
just lost Jeff, so
Yeah.
we're now down to a challenge, three panelists, but maybe we could, Patrick, we could just go along. But
Yeah.
tell us something you've identified.
Sure. Well, I could talk about workforce again, but I think we've heard a lot about that. So, just thinking about advanced technologies. When you look at in our region, the Greater Pittsburgh, Northern West Virginia region, we have seen significant growth in manufacturing output. We've had 7% growth. We've had some decline in jobs actually because of the reasons we've already talked about. But our productivity is falling a little behind, and so we have to look at that very carefully. Now, for some reasons, we could say that our IMCP is based on our advanced materials, precision manufacturing. These are low volume, high value added types of manufacturing sectors, so it does take a highly skilled workforce. They're not as prone to automation, let's say like an automotive industry, which is very high volume, automated type. So we can explain and rationalize some of that, but at the end of the day, we have to take a look at that very carefully and make sure that our manufacturers are keeping up with technology, they're investing in places where they should be investing, and that they're taking a look at productivity as well as output and other factors of success, because we know that productivity is a main driver of economic prosperity in a community.
Okay, thank you, Irene.
I would say the challenges associated with adapting to new technology are hard for small manufacturers. There's now, we all know about cybersecurity to some extent, but there are, for companies that are part of the defense industry supply chain, there's something called DFARS, and it's a level of security that you have to achieve. And if you're going to be part of the defense industry supply chain, you must have this. And the big OEMs are responsible for all the people in their supply chain complying. But most of these small manufacturers, they don't even have an IT person. So they, they're just like, they have no idea what to do. And I think people need help and support. We are using some of the funds we have through our grant from the Office of Economic Adjustment to provide cybersecurity training to manufacturers. But most we can do is like encourage people and maybe kind of scare them. I went to one of these trainings and, it's like an insurance salesman, because just about anything you think could go wrong, But once they leave, it's still a lot of work to become compliant. And so that's a huge challenge. And right now, it's just the defense industry, but eventually banks, everybody are going to have the same level of security. And it's, a real challenge, how we're going to get ready and comply.
So for Connecticut, it's similar in the challenge around workforce, and not just skills, but also the labor pool and people. So we are facing that challenge, as well as having our companies be ready for Industry 4.0 and taking innovation and bringing that into their facilities and making sure they can advance quickly to get to Industry 4.0 in order to be competitive globally. I'd say from a programmatic standpoint, some of the challenges that we'll see going forward is sustaining the effort. We've put a lot of funding into the effort and sustaining that, and keep maintaining the industry participation. We foresee being strong, but it's the resources that are needed and the tools that are needed. And in addition, a focus on manufacturing at our government level to continue. So that, from a programmatic standpoint, that's what I'd say would be challenges.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, a further area of questioning here is just about the potential of the collaboration. Now, obviously, the 24 communities don't get on the phone every Monday morning, and network, talk about what they're doing, discuss common problems and solutions, and endeavor to work together across the nation for nothing. They're doing it because they're benefiting already. We want to increase that, and we wanted to hear from our panel about what you see as the potential. I mean, what can we accomplish that we're not accomplishing by strengthening this collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely. When we developed our IMCP, we had a very clear-cut goal. We wanted to see 2% annual job growth in manufacturing. We're not quite there yet, but the potential is to get there. The jobs are there, the companies are there, and now we need to connect the job seekers and to those jobs. And we talked about a number of initiatives that we can engage in to do that. And like our area, like the entire country, our unemployment rate is low as well. But if you look deeper, particularly I think in urban communities, there are significant pockets. We still have 55,000 people that are unemployed in Pittsburgh, in the greater Pittsburgh region. That's a lot of people. Some of those people might want to be employed if they knew about the opportunities available to them. We have 25,000 high school graduates every year, 70% are college bound. You have to start questioning, of that 70%, should they all be? Maybe not, right? And then what do you do for the other 30%? So there is a lot of opportunity. So the potential is to achieve our goal of 2% annual job growth while maintaining our output, maintaining our productivity, and while maintaining the DoD's needs for a strong defense supply base.
I think there's a lot of potential. I think we have in Chicago a good foundation. One of the things that's helping us as we kind of move into another phase is data. And so we were fortunate to, through the Manufacturing Communities Program, we met the Office of Economic Adjustment at the Department of Defense, and we were able to develop a supply chain mapping tool with the University of Illinois, and it updates from 20 sources live, and we can see in the Chicago area, and my colleagues can see in their respective geographies around the state, every contract that is contracted by the Department of Defense through a contracting office. And through that, we are learning a lot. We see what's contracted in Illinois, what goes elsewhere, and it's also, we hope, going to help us identify some of these lone suppliers, some of the smaller businesses, and with that data, we will be able to be much more strategic. So I think there's potential to do a lot more, and this ecosystem approach gets everybody to the table.
I would just quickly add that I think that the potential through this particular program and the collaboration allows states to have best thinking and best practices and be able to share that and collectively come together to try to address issues that is really tough for one state to do. Around this workforce, we're all talking about it, but it's great to be able to bounce off ideas, share best models, practices that we're doing in our states and other states, specifically on the growth, where our future jobs will be going and the skills that we need, and making sure that there is equality and that we're bringing all of our citizens forward and not leaving anyone behind and allowing the opportunities to come. So this collaboration provides that platform, and it's exciting to see, and I look forward to continuing this. With or without the appropriations, I believe this group will continue to move forward. With appropriations, we will definitely be able to do more for our industry. Thank you.
Well, great, thank you very much. So I'm going to turn the program over now to Matt again, because we want to hear both another presentation and we want to hear from you with some more questions. So,
Great. Thank you, panel, and thank you, Michael Goff, for that. Now, there's these collaboratives, these communities doing this for 5 years all across the country, and we had to pick 4 to come up and present. This was very competitive. And it's like a great collaboration, but it's also herding cats, and we need much more of a backbone organization around the country to help that happen. That's the purpose of AMCC, this new national nonprofit that we're doing. Well, to get to this far, we needed leadership, and all of these IMCPs have led, and one of the greatest leaders has been Sarah Lee from the IMCP in the state of Washington, and every week she's leading these national collaboration calls. She's done a fantastic job, so I want to invite her up to describe her effort in Washington. We also have Trish Kelly from California's IMCP effort, so we want to hear from those two, and then Sarah Lee, you can lead the Q&A from there. So Sarah Lee from Washington.
Thanks, Matt. So every Monday morning, I get on the phone and talk with 23 other manufacturers, communities, and it's hard to believe that these people started out as competitors, and now we work really, really closely together. So that is really bizarre and good. But before I get on the phone on Monday mornings at 8:30 Pacific, I get on my bicycle, and I get my bicycle down to go to the ferry terminal, and I get on the second largest double-ended ferry boat in the world, and I get on the third largest ferry system in the world. And that ferry system is emblematic of what we're doing in Washington State. We've got this program called Washington Maritime Blue, and our job is a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, and that is to turn our maritime industry into the most economically and environmentally sustainable in the country. And we're doing that in a bunch of different ways, and we're doing it a lot of times leaning on our fellow manufacturing communities. But let me just tell you real quick what we're doing. We're taking that big ferry boat, the one that has 2,500 people on it in the morning. You can barely find a seat. And it actually, by the way, has 24.2 million people that it carries back and forth every year. Yes. Anyway, we're going to turn that, which is diesel, into electric. And to do that, we're going to we have 35-minute ferry run, right? And then it sits at the dock for 15 minutes and has to recharge. And then it has to go back and recharge. So these will be the largest shoreside battery air things in the world. So that's one thing, and what we're doing with that is we're working with our supply chain on all the different pieces to get them ready to deliver all the different parts and pieces and technology. We're also creating a manufacturing innovation center. So if you are in Yakima or you are in the Emerald Coast Opportunity Zone in Clallam County and Jefferson County, you can take advantage of the research that's happening in the I-5 corridor. For those of you who do not know Seattle, that is the I-5 corridor, but there's a lot of Washington that's not there. And we're putting together this manufacturing innovation center so it will be virtual. So all of these folks can take advantage of that. And then the last thing is we're trying to create a Maritime Blue Fund. You guys have heard of Microsoft and Amazon, right? Well, you know, the way the culture is in Washington State, if you got some pizza and some beer and a couple of weekends, you can create a project or a product and you can find venture capital for it. But if you're doing that in the maritime space, you can't. Because people don't realize that maritime is just as innovative as regular IT. In fact, one of the things you'll see up there, what we're going to do next week is we're going to have this meeting, which is called Uptown Tech Meets the Working Waterfronts. And we're going to put together some joint industry projects that will combine the IT expertise and the maritime know-how. Last piece is industrial symbiosis. All of our manufacturers create waste. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the waste becomes the feedstock of the next piece, the next manufacturing. And one of the things that we're doing as part of Maritime Blue is we have a paper mill, and we're hoping to restart it. It's in Port Angeles, Washington, economically distressed, really cool, wonderful people. What does a pulp mill What's their waste? Well, carbon dioxide and heat. The Jamestown Sklallam tribe says, hey, we want that because that's going to help us grow algae for our aquaculture. So all of a sudden, we're creating we're building our maritime blue, rural, tribal, industrial symbiosis, etc. So every morning, on Monday morning, these are the folks who inspire me. And one of the other folks that inspires me is Trish right here with a Valley Vision in California. See, now you guys get the West Coast, okay?
Yeah.
Could you explain what your BHAG, what your IMCP program is doing?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah is our leader and just our heart and soul. So we have a fabulous network, and it's been a very rich experience for all of us. We're around 2 IMCP region, and Valley Vision is an intermediary. So we work with a lot of system partners to try to work on ecosystem issues. And in our IMCP, we also partner with Fresno State in the southern part of our valley, Central Valley, and Chico State in the northern part. So these are 2 university-led economic development centers. Our big area audacious goal is we are 28 counties. It's the biggest IMCP region, go big or go home. We have over 4 million people just in this region in a state of 36 million plus. So we're based in Sacramento and we're the sub-regional lead Valley Vision, and so we're the capital of the 5th largest economy in the world. And yet we have critical challenges for our ecosystem, including not only broadband, but workforce, capital access, etc. We like to say that we're a hinge region because we have urban and rural, so we feel like the interface of our urban and rural economies is another thing that we can help prototype some strategies for. We're very focused on inclusive growth, which I think is critical in the manufacturing sector. We talked a lot about how we have a lot of job opportunities, but we have huge job skills mismatch. In our region alone, we have 41,000 manufacturing jobs, but last year we had 10,000 job openings. And we have a huge issue with career awareness because people don't see this as a viable opportunity, and they don't see how manufacturing has changed, how much innovation and technology is there. So as in our region, we work very closely with our community colleges and our workforce boards and employers to create partnerships that will not only generate data on the skills gaps, but how we can meet the gaps with emerging skills, including kind of future of work digitalization of skills, which we've heard so much about that today. And that's driving new investments from the community colleges, especially to align with middle skills jobs gaps. We have 3 employer-led manufacturing associations across the valley. The one in the Sacramento region really came about as a result of this work. So now we have Siemens at Mobility, which is a huge firm in our region, which driving the supply chain back as the leadership of our employer group. So we don't want to just have engagement with employers, we want partnerships. And it's really that ecosystem piece that is driving change. So they came together to address the skills gap. So one of our outcomes was that we've developed a special training program in apprenticeships for CNC controllers, and we're doing that with our community college. So the value in our network is that we're all telling each other these stories. We're looking at how we're creating pathways. You can see how workforce has just been a huge issue for us. Another thing that we've done is we have a big network of a statewide network of incubators and accelerators. This is driven through an EDA grant. So it's through the University of California, and it's connecting nodes around the state. So we're really trying to drive innovation through the supply chain. And then one of the things that we are really looking at is dual technologies, where they're related to the food and ag space and the defense and manufacturing industry. So that includes things like robotics, drones, artificial intelligence, and big data. So those are some of the important issues. And just want to say on the regional talent development, we're funded by JP Morgan Chase because we're all trying to figure this out.
Thank you, Trish. And I want to give a shout out to the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program that's the NIST MEP program. I think all of us are, take advantage of that help. They work with our small and medium-sized manufacturers. I don't know what we'd do without them. And Economic Development Agency, they do truly rock. But I'm wondering if they've got a couple minutes for some questions or comments. Anybody out there would like to take a moment? Yes, sir.
You mentioned NIST and MEP, and earlier someone mentioned the SBA. I was kind of curious if you could touch on some of these other programs that didn't get discussed in terms of manufacturing. So like SBA does a lot, but other than a few ad hoc programs, doesn't do a lot for manufacturing per se.
I'm going to ask Petra to answer that.
Yes, thank you. So I mentioned earlier we inventory the funding that we have received in our community, and certainly MEP is part of that inventory. The DoD through the OEA has been a good, strong funder as well. But we're unique in that we're in the Appalachian region. So the Appalachian Regional Commission has been funding us quite a bit as well around coal-impacted communities and diversifying manufacturing into advanced manufacturing in other sectors like defense and other sectors. So that's been a strong partner of ours, the EDA as well, that's been mentioned. And then, like I said, we have philanthropic organizations in the greater Pittsburgh region that have made significant investments in our manufacturing community that we've been able to leverage as match.
Trish?
Also, USDA has been a very
yes.
important investor, especially around capital access strategies and food hubs and incubators that are helping to drive value added. That's one reason we got our designation, was because we have a lot of crop production, but we were missing on the capturing of the value add.
And I would just add Department of Labor. We have two of our partners got significant DOL grants through the program. America's Promise, and the other one was for wraparound services, child care, and America's Promise was apprenticeship, and then there was another one for wraparound services.
And that's one of the great things about IMCP is that we got BFFs. They say it they laugh. We're not laughing. They are our BFFs who help us figure out all the different types of agencies, EPA. I mean, we could go on. There's just a lot of great help we've been getting. Yes, sir.
So there's a program that you haven't mentioned that doesn't provide funding to manufacturing communities, but is closely connected to them. That's the Manufacturing USA Institute.
Yes.
Well, in fact, I think we sort of did.
So Steve Linder is responsible at MTech for their piece. Mark Palmer is responsible.
Well, yeah.
Mark, we got that from Deloitte, has done a major study. MCO, WI is involved with Richmond on this. So, maybe one of the panelists would.
That's a really good point, because, there's robotics. That would be Petra. And there would be, go ahead.
We have, now it's called M times D, Manufacturing times Digital, which was formerly DMDII in Chicago, and particularly in their newest form, we have met with them several times about cybersecurity, and they want to work with us because we have connections to small manufacturers, which they have not developed as much. So, no, we think it's an incredible resource, and I apologize for not mentioning it previously.
There's been a lot of people who've helped. Carmen?
Yeah, just in regards to the Institute, Connecticut participates and works very closely with the Smart Manufacturing and the Next Flex Institutes, and are really finding some help and support through those efforts, and specifically around innovation and new technologies. It's critical.
And IACME, too, for composites. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Steve Linder from the DoD, who has some of the Manufacturing USA Institutes, and I'm going to put maybe Mark Lavalette on the spot here. Could you tell a little bit about what we're doing with the diversification of the program with EDIRC there in the Philadelphia area?
So Mark Lavalette from Deloitte. Thank you for throwing me under the bus. It's manufactured in the United States. So what Steve is referring to is we're partnering with one of Petra's compadres, DVIRC, and also America Makes regionalization assessment. Essentially, it's going to develop a playbook that's going to work with small, medium manufacturers, primarily through IRCs, and how they can connect and herd cats amongst the communities. So where you've got each one of the different institutes has got its own manufacturing and regionalization kind of focus. The IRCs have theirs, it's trying to, and the gentleman talked great about Provo, it's bringing the railroads together and how to do that. And so that's something that we're going to be completing by the middle of the summer, and then we'll go on kind of a speaking tour from there when Steve gives us the go-ahead.
Fantastic. I'm just going to do, I know that we promised we were going to be, everybody, okay, yes, you got
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing. One thing that's really helped us is working with our industry associations. So we work with the California League of Food Producers, the California Manufacturing Technology Association, and when you do that, you can begin to get to scale and impact too.
Yes, and we're also taking advantage of opportunity zones with our Emerald Coast Opportunity Zones folks as well. So, a lot of more questions. These folks will be staying. We really appreciate this. I'm going to hand it back over to Matt, who's going to wrap us up for today.
Great round of applause for our panelists and Sarah Lee. Thank you, and appreciate everybody being here and participating. You know, the bottom line is, you know, this model can flourish, this ecosystem approach, and we need robust appropriation on the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program to help elevate it, to help overcome some of the problems that you've heard here. We heard from the congressman about the importance of the new reintroduced Manufacturing Community Act. So we need support for that. You know, I want to really thank our partners, the Century Foundation and the Northeast Midwest. AMCC now has a website.
It's on their agenda.
Oh, it's on your agenda, okay, and you have a packet of material. There's a lot more to learn about this community model, so please reach out to any of us so that we can bring you along and educate what we've learned so far, and join us as partners as we try to really build this ecosystem approach up for not only strengthening the defense industrial base, but American manufacturing across the board. So that ends the briefing. Thank you very much, and let's stay around the clock.